with Minneapolis 2040, I had 2 buildings almost killed by that lawsuit.
As we always do here on the Wedge Life podcast, we thank the pretend environmentalists at what are they? Smart Growth Minneapolis, the people who did the fake environmentalist lawsuit against the 2040 plan. Yes. Look what you have done to Cody Fischer. You're going to cancel his very unique and innovative, environmentally friendly project there that the neighborhood likes and supports.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
This is the Wedge Life podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. Joining me today is Cody Fischer. He is the owner of Footprint Development, right? You're the owner?
Yes, owner, sole employee, yes.
Just like I'm the owner of Wedge Life.
Exactly, yeah, just like that.
CEO, editor, publisher. So Footprint Development owns, manages carbon-smart, climate-resilient, multifamily housing and walkable, bikeable, transit-rich Minneapolis neighborhoods. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Maybe we start by talking about what you do, what you put into your buildings, like that makes them unique. Talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So I've only done development projects in Minneapolis, and that's for good reason. So for me, I got into real estate development about 5 years ago. Minneapolis 2040 is what enabled it. But I was really motivated by climate change and just being an urbanist. And so the projects I do they're always located, like you said, in kind of urban core neighborhoods that at least make it possible to have a car light lifestyle, to reduce the carbon footprint of living from transportation. And then what's unique about the buildings, separate from their location, is I do low carbon emissions construction. So there's this thing called embodied carbon, which is the greenhouse gas emissions associated with like the materials in the building process itself. That accounts for like 80% of the emissions of any new building in its first 10 years. And so I specifically try to compress that as much as possible. So about 60% on my typical projects. And that's just by being smart about insulations and what kind of concrete you use and things like that. And then I also build passive house apartment buildings, certified apartment buildings. So that's kind of at the most extreme end of the energy efficiency spectrum. So about 70 to 75% more energy efficient than typical new construction. So you've got extra thick walls with insulation, triple pane windows, everything's electric, use heat pumps instead of burning natural gas for heat and things like that.
And you've got solar panels too.
Yes. Right? Yeah. About, across my projects, about 40% of the building's energy consumption comes from rooftop solar. And that's in part possible because you compress the energy consumption so much to begin with. And then I always try to max out what we install in terms of solar.
So what you do is unique. Like not everyone is doing this, right? Like I can think of maybe 2 or 3 people building this way. Maybe it's more and I'm not aware, but like, yeah, how unique is this?
It's extremely unique in our market here in the Twin Cities. I mean, globally in the US, it's also quite unique, but there have been kind of market rate apartment developers that do this passive house level building on the coasts, like in Seattle and Philadelphia, New York, for about a decade. But I'm the first one here locally to do a passive house building like this that wasn't like a low income housing tax credit project. But there is a kind of a budding ecosystem of neighborhood scale or missing middle scale green developers. We have a group called the Sustainable Developer Collaborative and meet to try to support each other in doing this kind of work. But this extreme energy efficiency and low carbon stuff is really, in our market, it's really just us kind of small community-based developers that are trying to do this work.
So efficiency is not just good for the planet. Like, it does save money. It's like an investment in longer term savings. Like, it can be cheaper to operate the building. Maybe the tenants have lower energy costs because the building is more efficient. Can you talk about those considerations?
Yeah, so all of the above. The traditional way of building new buildings is to build it as cheap as possible up front. You put a utility meter on every single unit, right? And then you push all of the cost of utilities off onto the building occupants. And so then the financial incentive to build efficient and build green is not there from the owner developer's perspective, right? So and so that's why what we get for the most part is super leaky buildings with, thin windows, thin walls, acoustically bad. They're drafty. You have big southern windows that the blinds are closed all the time in the summer because it's blazing hot inside. And then you've got these crazy utility bills. So it's uncomfortable and expensive for people. And so what I've done is in the model to make it work where you align the economics and what's good for the planet is by basically going back to how we managed buildings 50 years ago. So there's 1 meter on my buildings, and I just charge, rent. Rent includes utilities, right? But because and it does cost more to build the way I build. So it's my last project, which is a 4-story building in Northeast, cost about 7% more to build than a typical cheaply built code minimum building. But it's 73% more energy efficient. And what I give my building occupants is, your total cost to live in that building for the 12 months of your lease. You're not going to have crazy utility prices. And the cost of rent plus utilities is less than a new building down the street. You definitely don't get a rooftop deck or a sauna or, structured underground parking in a small building like this, but you get a slightly lower cost to live in a brand new building with units that have better air quality, are a lot quieter. And then for me, the economic incentives align because I've reduced the energy consumption of the occupants by so much just by the way we've designed and built the building.
Okay, are you ready to get into the tax code? I know listeners
Yes.
have been waiting for us to get into the tax code.
Yes.
The city has a 4D program, and I'm sorry, I have a couple of paragraphs of explanation here, just so people know what we're talking about. City of Minneapolis' 4D program offers tax breaks for building owners who maintain rents at or below 60% area median income. The city is about to make a change to the 4D program so that studios and 1-bedrooms would only qualify for these tax breaks at 50% area median income. So from 60 to 50 on 1-bedrooms and studios. So why? The state of Minnesota recently made this particular tax break more generous. As a result, the city is worried the program will become too popular and eat into the city's tax base. To give a sense of how popular the program has become, the number of units enrolled in the city's 4D program in 2024, so this year, are equal to the number of units enrolled in the previous 6 years combined. So the city's worried that they won't be able to afford how popular it's becoming. Another factor here, average Minneapolis market rents for studios and 1-bedrooms are already below the 60% area median income. So there's a lot of units in the city that are potentially eligible for this. And so 60% area median income, I'll give people a sense of what that is. It's $1,305 for a studio. It's $1,398 for a 1-bedroom. Average Minneapolis rents currently for a studio is $1,040, and then for a 1-bedroom is $1,282. So that's below 60%. So the market is producing a lot of units below 60% area median income. Okay, there we go. We got through it. So do you see the city's point, though? Like, it's hard to argue with a lot of the points they're making. There's a lot of units eligible for this tax break, but budget times are tough. You could see a flood of landlords enrolling their units. And do you see the concern?
Absolutely. Like, on a surface level, this does seem to make sense. And the recommendations that city staff have presented to the council come from a consultant that the city hired to look at the program and has worked with the city on affordability programs in the past and the design of those. But I think the analysis is a bit rudimentary. It doesn't take into account kind of the differences in geographic variation across the city. And it's not really connected to how I think landlords make decisions about whether or not to commit to, restricting their rents at an affordable level for a decade, right? There's a lot of uncertainty involved in that decision. And so a lot of those implications haven't been considered. I know that it makes sense to be, I think, deeply concerned about the city's property tax base and tax capacity when we're talking about pretty massive and substantial tax levy increases going forward. But at the end of the day, the property tax base that or tax capacity that these units in the program represent today, it's like less than 0.5% of the city's property tax capacity. I think right now, including the big increase in units in the program, there's around 5,000 units in the program. I'm just going to use round numbers for simplicity. But there's about 100,000 rental units available citywide, right? And that is just a small fraction of the overall city's tax base, right?
Right.
And so that is a bit of a red herring. And the city, in addition to having to deal with its fiscal issues long term, has meaningful and critical goals in terms of housing preservation and abundance. And so to think about an affordable housing abundance and to think about only one, when this is really, this program is it's the only tool the city has at its disposal for affordable housing preservation. And though there are definitely places in the city where, average rents for certain types of units are below the maximum that you're allowed to charge in the program, there are plenty of places in the city that are not. And so I think that my biggest concern on this is actually related to the geographic distribution of where we're preserving affordable housing. But we can circle back and I can elaborate on that.
So when I think about what you do, like, there's definitely a good in what you do, like producing like very sustainable buildings. That's good, but I don't necessarily think of it as like affordable housing. Mm-hmm. Right? Like 60%, the AMI standard gets a lot of criticism because incomes have gone up in the metro area. That doesn't necessarily reflect what incomes actually are. Right. And so when looking at those rents, like $13.98 for a one bedroom is not what a lot of people would consider affordable. Like, it's not, it could be reasonable to a person, but depending on what your income is, not affordable. For example, I live in what would be considered maybe deeply affordable housing at this point. Yeah. And I like having it's not subsidized in any way, and there's no standards for me to live here. Yeah. But so do you think of what you do as like producing affordable housing?
I think it's a part of what I do, and I've made it with intention a part of what I do. So in all my projects, 20% of the units have been affordable at 60% AMI. That's been possible because of this program. Because new construction is very expensive, right? And so some degree of subsidy in order to maintain attainable rents, if you don't feel these are affordable, right? And the point you're making resonates with me, like that, that's just the reality of the cost of new construction. But in terms of the people that I am able to lease these units to and can call my buildings home, it's more diverse, and that's because of this program, and that's a good thing. So I have
Right.
graduate students on in my most recent building from the Humphrey. I have a beautician, right? I have people in the Section 8 program with vouchers that are living in the building, in addition to like people with higher incomes. And I think that that's a net benefit for the community, and within a building. And that's why I want to, and I participate in the program. But I also think that that's really critical at a neighborhood level. And so one of the key things, there are two key, I think, misperceptions that are persisting at the council level that make me fear that these changes are going to pass and undermine the program, that I just want to address offhand. So one, just like within a building, I think it's good to have a mix of incomes, and for everybody in the building, and that's good. That's important at the neighborhood level too. And so the 4D program started in 2019, and in the years up to through 2022, when the program had the lower level of tax benefit, the vast majority of units that were enrolled in the program were concentrated in historically segregated, high poverty neighborhoods. The vast majority of them were in like Phillips and North, right? And then when the incentive was increased, that kind of could bring on, and those areas tend to be neighborhoods where you're not going to anticipate significant rent growth going forward. So you're not having landlords buy a building and do lots of renovations to charge way higher rents, right? And that's the program, the NOAA program. That's the core of the core intent, is to kind of prevent that and to preserve the affordable housing that we have. So that's why with that lower tax benefit, you saw the units enrolled in the program concentrated in those areas. When the tax benefit was increased, you saw an uptick in interest in the program, because there was a lot of folks that maybe they were charging rents that were, closer to that 60% AMI, probably not above it, that said, well, okay, with this size tax benefit, it's worth it to me to commit to having this legally restricted at this affordability level for 10 years, even if rents in the neighborhood continue to rise, right? Even if that happens. And so that's how we've gotten a broader distribution across neighborhoods interested in applying. Just part of the problem with the city's consultants' analysis was looking at median rents citywide, so the 50th percentile, relative to the limits that you can charge in the program. And yeah, you can charge the market rate for a 1-bed unit in some neighborhoods is $800. It's not $1,200, but in other neighborhoods, it's a 1-bed unit, it is $1,400, right? And that's just the reality of the different neighborhoods in the city, and then also the different levels of quality of housing. Like I'm talking about new construction, that's my business, right? The other big thing that I think is a misperception is that, and driving the staff's recommendation to reduce to 50% AMI, is that on these units that are enrolling in the program who would already be charging rents below the limit, so I'm going to charge $800. I would have, even if I wasn't in the 4D program, even though it allows me to charge $1,100. The concern is that we're giving them a subsidy and we're not receiving any public benefit in return, right? Mm-hmm. And because they're not lowering their rents to participate in the program. But when the tax benefit was increased by the state legislature, that also coincided with a requirement that landlords invest every dollar of the tax benefit into improving and maintaining the property itself. And landlords are legally responsible for documenting that they've done that, right?
So is that enforceable? Like I've heard questions like, can we even enforce that? How do we know they're not pocketing it? Who's enforcing it and how? And can we trust that?
And I think so this is a new requirement, so it's not been something that has been enforced yet, but certainly, I see this as an opportunity for the city, because when you look at the concentration of units in the program, in the neighborhoods I already mentioned, that's also where tier 3 classified rental units, those are units that are cited with the most building deficiencies and code violations and things like that. That's where those units are also concentrated in the city. right? And so now there's an annual, just like you have to submit and certify annually that you're renting the units out to people who are below the income threshold. The city can also require that landlords submit the documentation that show that they're spending the money on maintenance and improvements and upkeep. And so it actually getting more of those units into the program presents an opportunity to improve the quality of the affordable housing stock that we have in those neighborhoods that have been historically, poorly maintained and underinvested in. So, there is a mechanism. Certainly it would take more staff time to review that submission, right? But now there is actually, the city has a carrot and a stick for units that are in this program where it didn't historically.
There's an argument there's an opportunity cost. Like, this program costs more per unit than the city investing through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, like significantly more when it comes to new construction, which is what you do. And so 60% AMI, as we've discussed, is not like that affordable, to the point where the city has like shifted their focus for affordable housing production to the deeply affordable 30% AMI level.
Right.
And so how can we justify subsidy to 60% AMI units at the expense of potentially investing in the 30% AMI units?
Yeah. So I think the question of production and preservation, like, we need a both and strategy in the city. So there's multiple parts of that. There's the cost effectiveness piece, which I want to circle back to. Don't let me forget. But okay. We're losing annually around 2,000 units of affordable housing a year in the city of Minneapolis, right? We aren't producing enough to offset that or to overcome what we've already lost over the last 15 years. And when
we say affordable, like, we just mean like naturally occurring affordable housing.
Yeah,
like
the number I'm citing,
renting below 60.
The number I'm citing was at a 50% threshold.
Okay.
Because unfortunately, the data, that was at a 50% threshold. Or if you look at like the 2040 comp plan, in there they look at 2000 to 2015. And there, I think, were 15,000 units lost below 50% AMI during that period, right? And we're not producing anywhere near that level. The council is not talking about increasing funding going into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to cut more checks and accelerate and expand the production of more deeply affordable units in coinciding and offsetting this, capping this program. Like, it needs to be a both and strategy. In terms of, so I would say that as a whole, in terms of the cost effectiveness of the program, I was at the biz committee hearing where the staff or the consultant verbally mentioned the average investment from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund per unit. I don't recall what he said it was, but for 10 years of affordability, I think they were talking on average between $20,000 and $30,000 in tax benefit over the course of 10 years for a unit in the 4D program. Do you recall what he said was I
have the numbers here. So 10-year tax reduction 4D per unit ranges from 26 to 32, depending on how big the building is. $26,000 to $32,000 over 10 years.
Yep.
And then I forget what the Affordable Housing Trust Fund number was, but maybe
I think he stated it and
double.
He didn't put it in his deck,
right?
In his presentation, unfortunately. So one, that is a limited trust fund, right? And those units cost $260,000 per unit to build, regardless of the subsidy level. And we can target that towards more deeply affordable, certainly. That analysis doesn't, so this is like, this is a financy thing, but it doesn't consider the time value of money. So dollars today are worth more than dollars in the future, right? And so that $30,000 in tax benefit over the course of 10 years, right? It's only it's only 10% of it's 3,000 of that, right, in the first year, and then three, and then three, and then three. Like it's over time, right? And whereas when the city invests from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, that's a lump sum all at once today, right? And so that money is more expensive to the city today, right? So it's not, that was kind of an apples to oranges comparison on the part of that outside consultant. But and so I this is actually a relatively cost-effective program in order to preserve affordable housing, because we'll lose it at an increasing rate, especially as we are now entering a phase where there is not much new housing construction in Minneapolis generally because of high interest rates and high construction costs, right? And that's not going to change for the foreseeable future. And so rent growth is going to start to accelerate in the city. And as we see that, a lot of those units that were on the margin are going to become more expensive and no longer below that affordability threshold. And, the trust fund is not going to exist to a degree to like replace those units that we're going to lose at an accelerating rate over time. So, right now is when we can get units into the program. What I don't want to see, and what this coalition of advocates don't want to see, is, there's a lot of consideration of the risk of overwhelming staff capacity because so many units are going to apply, or eroding the city's property tax base because so many units are going to apply. But there's not consideration of, well, if we overshoot and we drop this thing down to 50% and we completely, and demand for the program completely implodes, that's a whole year of NOAA preservation that we're missing out on, right?
Right.
A year in which
the city's argument would be we're locking these properties in for 10 years, and like the risk there is we're stuck with it for 10 years, right? There's a counter to that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But I would say preserving affordability below 60% is for 10 years is like a good thing. And when you look at the overall, there's around 100,000 rental units in the city. The maximum that would fall under this threshold is like 30,000 units. And so if what is the what if scenario if all 30,000 units participated in this, and like what would actually be nobody has done that analysis. If this is kind of the corollary to the 2040 full build out analysis, right?
Okay.
There's doomsdaying and concern of like, well, what if demand increases another sixfold? What is the implication of that? And like, the council members have not been presented the information of that actual scenario and whether or not that's a bad thing or a good thing to preserve.
I'm worried about getting into this math, but is it really just 30,000? Because if median rents are hundreds of dollars, at least in the 1 and 2 bedroom range.
I'm quoting what someone else in this space. I did not do the math on it. I was talking to another advocate recently, so maybe we just put a pin in that and dismiss that as a made up statistic. And let's not go down that path. But
I'm not at all confident in my head math, but I don't know.
Nonetheless,
I'm just curious about it.
Nonetheless, like that analysis hasn't been done, and the reduction to 50% is based off of 50% AMI is based off of, a very rudimentary like median threshold. And it was also done using CoStar data, which is a good industry data source for a subset, like for large building rent data, but it's very limited and much more limited than other data sets that are available to the city for this kind of analysis that would be more robust. So, this whole decision is being rushed really quickly right now because city wants to open the program for 2025 applications, I think on Friday. And so they're scrambling to get this change before they open the applications.
Oh, is that what's going on? Like the council meeting is Thursday and then the application period opens on Friday?
Yeah, it's on the announced timeline for when they're planning to accept applications. I believe it's on the website. Yeah.
Can they not just delay the application opening? Maybe you don't know this.
The concern there is it does take them time. Like they have, one of the motivations for this is limited staff capacity, right? That's one of the stated concerns. And when you apply to the 4D program, staff has to review it, and then there's a whole process of once you're approved and in, you have to record a deed restriction and sign contracts with the city and the county recorder's office. And then there's an application to the state authority, which does the tax classification for the units. And the state authority has a deadline. And so, if we compress by pushing out the application opening period, we can't move it on the back end because that's in the state's control.
So the way I'm looking at this, like what you do is good. Like building housing, just in general, building more housing is a good. I'm a co-founder of Neighbors for More Neighbors. I believe this in my heart and my soul. Mm-hmm. And then what you do, you go above and beyond to build a sustainable new construction. You're putting all these extra features in your housing. Like that's a good thing.
Yep.
But I'm also like, it's not affordable to my mind. And maybe we disagree a little bit on that, but like maybe there should be a program that offers developers money or a tax break to put in all these features in their buildings because we believe in that. We believe more people should be doing that. You're one of the few people who are doing it. So I don't know, maybe that's not possible in the tax code, but do you know, is there a way to do that?
Yeah. Well, so the city So I do have a very narrow self-interest in the changes to this program as well. I genuinely believe like we should not dropping to 50% AMI will result in an increasing concentration geographically of where these units are enrolled. And that is a bad thing because we should have, affordable or accessibly priced housing in all neighborhoods in the city, not just a couple that are historically lower income and highly segregated, right? So that is genuinely what I believe. But in addition to that, there's a small subset of sustainable developers like me doing the smaller scale projects that have found a way to combine the 4D program with the City of Minneapolis has a green cost share program where they provide some grant funding for things like solar panels, share a part of the cost of solar panels or building weatherization, energy efficiency improvements, decarbonization, things like that. And if you enroll in the 4D program and have a percentage of your units in that, it allows you to seek a higher level of grant funding. So I, for example, seek this passive house certification, which is really on the extreme end of that, and I can get up to $100,000 in grant funding from the city if I'm also participating in the 4D program. That's not, that is meaningful and a significant amount of money on a building of this scale, right? And so it makes it possible to kind of combine all those things. So I actually have the other challenge here. So I have a 32 unit passive house project that was designed and approved. This is at Minnehaha and 36th, supported by the Greater Longfellow Community Council, approved unanimously by the Planning Commission, and then was put on pause because of one of the multiple injunctions with the Minneapolis 2040 lawsuit. This is the second building I've had impacted this way. And so that construction was delayed a year. But that building was designed to the passive house level with specific units to be in the 4D program, right? And all of that was designed over a year and a half ago. And we are now on the verge. We're looking to start construction in February, this coming February, on this project. And if the city changes the program rules for 4D, which we designed the building to off of the 60% AMI stuff, we won't be able to participate in the 4D program. It will then disqualify us from getting the passive house $100,000 grant, which blows a hole in my project budget.
Oh man.
And the overall economics, so I could lose my bank financing theoretically, right? So it's this chain reaction, because the time cycle for developing a project is normally at least a year or more, right?
And you're cobbling together all these funding sources.
Yes, right, yeah. So I mean, there are other ways I'm going to try to save the building, but it'll have a bigger effect, right? And
Right.
units in a new construction that, but that building, for example, will increase the city's annual property tax revenue by at least $90,000 if I build that building and remove the 3-unit building currently on the property. That dwarfs by multiples the tax benefit that the city is given
Right.
by participating in 4D, right? So.
As we always do here on the Wedge Life podcast, we thank the pretend environmentalists at what are they? Smart Growth Minneapolis, the
Yes.
people who did the fake environmentalist lawsuit against the 2040 plan.
Yes.
Look what you have done to Cody Fischer. You're going to cancel his very unique and innovative, environmentally friendly project there that the neighborhood likes and supports, all because you had to delay this.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's too bad.
I will say, like my job is to figure out ways to save the project and keep it moving forward. And, the state green bank, the Minnesota, MNCFA, I actually forget, Innovation Finance Authority, like working with them, we may be able to figure this out. But nonetheless, this has created a massive nightmare for this particular project now. And what it will do is kind of upend the model that this like small local developer ecosystem has just figured out, right? To try to use
that's what I'm trying to get at. Like, can we create a model for specifically, because you know what I don't want to do? I don't want to help Steve Min. That is my what a terrible man Steve Min is. Those are my opinions. But like, is there a way to like can we create another program or narrowly focus this one? Maybe you don't know these answers, but I feel like what you do is good.
Yeah.
And let's not ruin that good thing that has cropped up among a handful of small developers in the city. Let's keep that going and not have a flood of people like Steve Min coming in and taking advantage of this program.
Yeah,
love what you do, Steve.
I would support that. I mean, narrowly given the time constraints we have until a vote on Thursday.
Right.
I'm now, I still think we shouldn't change the program, right?
Okay.
But if the goal is to, to ensure we're getting public benefit, if the goal is to have geographic diversity in terms of the preservation of NOAA, it's to have certainty around the city's tax capacity exposure and have certainty and not overwhelm city staff. Like, I think the compromise way to not ruin the program for a year would be there's two options that this coalition I'm involved with is proposing to city council members and hoping they'll champion. One would be just to cap the number of units that the city will enroll in the program in the next year, and allocate that cap via quota across the wards based on their concentration of resident or their relative share of residential units, right? And if those quotas don't fill up in some areas, then you can redistribute it. And then that way too, we're seeing, well, how much is demand for this program going to continue? Is it actually going to increase another 6-fold like folks are so concerned about? Or is it something more modest and we can collect that data and we can do some better analysis? So that's one option that I feel accomplishes pretty much all the goals. The other would be, which is, I think, more simple, but would be to just exempt new construction, and because there's already an exemption in there for office to residential conversions.
Right. So here's an idea. So the city, I think it's a city policy that we are trying to encourage missing middle housing.
Yeah.
And I think missing middle got an exemption from IZ up to a certain point. I don't know if that was time limited or up to a number of units built.
Yeah, below 20 units, and then there was a phase in. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we could exempt new construction missing middle. We could create a checklist of like the Cody Fischer checklist of things I build into a new construction building, whether it's solar or like you tick this number of boxes out of 10 or 5 or whatever, and you have met our requirement for using what we're giving you into improving your building, making it more livable and affordable for people, like utility wise. I don't know if the city can do that, but like maybe we exempt missing middle from the new requirements, just like the office to residential conversion, something like that maybe.
That's another option too. I think the political reality of the situation and the time constraint that staff has put on council to just make a decision and have this resolved, I think points to either it's going to get passed as proposed, or probably, there has to be an extremely simple, technical amendment that is non-controversial, right? And because I don't think there's a broad appetite at the full council level in a meeting like that to have a super technical conversation, about the nuances of this program. And probably for the most part, it's just the members of the biz committee who already reviewed it, had the discussion, and forwarded it without recommendation to the full council who have the greatest insight. And so the other council members are just going to be deferring probably to those who they are aligned with and the perspective that they share when the full council meets. So, my hope is, that council member Cashman or Chowdhury, take a hard look at some of these alternative amendment kind of options that give us some more time to gather data and study over the next year, right? Without kind of messing up the program in the interim. But yeah, I think the trick with missing middle is that it's actually kind of a term of art.
Right.
Clearly duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, townhouses are included in that. Mm-hmm. There are purists who would say my 23 unit apartment building is not, right?
Yeah, the number I have in my head is like 20 units.
Yeah. Yep. So, yeah. And so, there would be some threshold there, right, that you'd have to draw. The new construction, would just make it more consistent with the office to residential conversion piece. Those are also, since this is narrowly talking about one beds and studios, generally speaking, it's only going to be in new construction, one bed and studio units where like this 50% versus 60% AMI is actually going to be a relevant kind of threshold discussion, right? Because a 60-year-old studio apartment is probably not going to have any problem maintaining at a 50% AMI. But if we want higher quality units also in this attainable, affordable universe, and we want them in other neighborhoods around the city, we have to have some sort of a fix different from what staff are proposing here.
Okay, are we done talking about the tax stuff? You have anything else to say?
Sure. Yep. Yes, okay. We can be done talking about the tax stuff. Yes.
So when I asked you to come on, you said you want to talk about the statewide single stair reforms that may be coming eventually to Minnesota.
Yes. Yeah. So
why is that important? And I imagine those regulations are for fire safety. Why would we not be concerned that thousands of people will die in a fire because of this reform somehow?
So in North America, Canada and the U.S., pretty much all new housing, multifamily construction looks the same and is the same. And it's these really fat, thick buildings with a long hallway that goes down the middle, just like a hotel, and long, skinny bowling alley, studio, and one bed units arrayed off of either side. And then you got to stair at either end. That's called a double loaded corridor. And that is pretty much the only thing we build in new construction in the U.S. because of how our fire code has evolved. Around the turn of the century, because of tenement fires in New York City, the model code changed to require 2 stairs above 3 stories. And that was a very sensible, a safety precaution to take then. But then over the subsequent, century plus, as we've had advancements in life safety technology and construction technology, like fireproof or fire rated and resistant wall assemblies, sprinklers, pressurized stairwells, ventilation systems, active ventilation systems, and things like that. These advancements, they were added in the code, and we use them, but we never kind of revisited this whole two-stair requirement. And as a result, unlike the rest of the world where single stair, some people call them point access blocks, single stair buildings, where it's basically a stair core with units tightly arrayed around it, efficiently arrayed around it with no long hallways. Those exist in abundance throughout the rest of the world. In many places, most places up to 6 stories. In some European countries, 20 and beyond. But in the US, we've only had them in Seattle, New York City, for the most part, and then in Honolulu as well more recently. And this has had profound implications for like how the built environment has evolved. Like we basically, you can't develop infilled high density housing on a standard 40-foot wide Minneapolis urban city lot because you have to have 2 stairs above 3 stories and the building is too wide, right? So we have all these places in the city of Minneapolis that are zoned for higher intensity land use, higher density housing, that are next to transit and all the great amenities that people want to live by. And land values are so high that you'd need to build a 4-story, 5-story building and to fit enough units on to justify the cost of that land. But we can't because the setback requirements and the thick buildings that we're required to build. So I've been working on this issue. There have been states across the country that have started to tackle this issue of single stair building code reform. In Minnesota, we have one standard building code. Cities and local jurisdictions can't deviate from that. So this is truly a state issue. And so there was a coalition of folks that worked with Larry Kraft in the House and Senator Lindsey Port in the Senate to try to legalize single stair buildings up to 6 stories in the state of Minnesota this last legislative session. Folks in I think the firefighters union and a couple other unions came out in opposition to the legislation that was going to direct our code officials to sort that out and update it. So we ended up getting a study funded. And so the state will generate a study on how to create these 6-story buildings safely with a single stair. They'll publish that in 2020, at the end of 2025. So that is out on the horizon still. In the interim, I moved forward with an organization called the Center for Building in North America to submit a technical code amendment through the administrative process. So right now, I think it's on a 6-year cycle, or maybe it's a 3-year cycle. Our code officials and technical experts at the state level gather to go through a multi-year process to update our building code. The next building code in the state of Minnesota is going to be adopted in 2026. So those folks are meeting right now to review technical proposals to incorporate in that. So I submitted a proposal to legalize single stair buildings up to 4 stories based on an alternative model code. We went multiple rounds of revisions with the technical advisory group, and on Halloween, that technical advisory group unanimously, which is comprised of like the fire marshal and code officials, they unanimously approved the 4-story amendment. So that is going to be in our 2026 building code. So 4-story buildings up with 1 stair will be legal statewide at that time. So that was a huge victory. We'll be like one of the first states to have this. And in the interim, now any local building code official has the discretion and authority to actually authorize a building to be built using this new approved language even before it's in the 2026 code. So if I had a project that was designed, I could go to the head building official in the city of Minneapolis and say, hey, will you allow me to do this based on this approval? And they have the authority to say yes. So technically, single stair buildings up to 4 stories can move forward in Minnesota right now.
Right now, it's legal right now. Get on it, everyone.
Get on it.
Single
Yes.
single stair buildings.
Absolutely. And the why this matters, it's in addition to unlocking that urban infill potential, it's like these buildings, when you spend less square footage on hallways and stairs, you can allocate some of that to other units. So it's rentable square footage. So it becomes more affordable to build and then rent out at reasonable rents, like a 2-bed or a 3-bed unit. You can have family sized units in a single stair building. You can have all corner units with like windows on multiple walls that you can open and get cross ventilation and get more sunlight, right? And in general, these buildings are more affordable to build because instead of only 85% of the building being able to be rentable square footage, you can have 95% be rentable square footage. So rents can be lower. So it's a win across the board, and we can build these buildings safely, and they'll be sprinklered and have all the other kind of requirements, and be safer than single family homes in Minnesota, which aren't required to have sprinklers. So,
and it is the policy of the city that we want to encourage missing middle housing, and this makes it easier to do the goals that we already have. So
yes, absolutely.
It's good.
Yep.
Are there any other things that you're concerned about as a small developer? Like, what would make your life easier? Like, what would get you building more buildings besides the things we've talked about today?
Honestly, I'm just really tired of the. There's nothing new that I would add, but the seemingly sensitive to the political upheaval that the city's policies and regime have. Like, with Minneapolis 2040, I had 2 buildings almost killed by that lawsuit, and then in a relatively new and inexperienced planning commission, kind of that wasn't up the training curve from staff yet, reject a fully legal conforming project.
Oh, really? I must have missed that
one.
When
this is the Van Buren Street saga. So 2 years ago, this was the building. You actually wrote about it and talked about it. This is the building on Van Buren Street near Central and Broadway. It's a 4-story building in Michael Rainville's ward. Bill Lendeke had written a piece about it and kind of held it up as a litmus test for Minneapolis 2040, when I had proposed a 4-story building in an area where you can build up to 6 stories, and the Planning Commission denied it based off of neighborhood opposition without citing any real legal findings. And so then I had to appeal that, and only because of the political pressure applied by Sierra Club, Neighbors for Neighbors, and other environmental groups, did I win that appeal and the project move forward.
Political certainty. You're looking for some political certainty.
Political certainty, yeah. And so now the state legislature finally put to rest the 2040 lawsuit, and the 4D program is now the thing. It's just so like, let's just have some stability for a while. I think that would be my preference.
I can't believe I forgot the whole saga of Van Buren Street. I cannot remember the details of that, but I must have at the time thought it was ridiculous.
You did. Yes, you did. You had some mighty powerful tweets on the topic. So
you have any recommendations? We do recommendations on this podcast, and it can be anything. It doesn't have to be a book. What are you enjoying? What do you like to do in your spare time to relax that you think other people will enjoy?
Let's see. Well, I'm a big fan of 99% Invisible, Roman Mars, that podcast, and he did, and I'm also a big fan of Robert Caro's book, the Power Broker.
Yeah. A lot of people are bringing that up to me recently. It must be having a resurgence.
Yeah, well, I think the resurgence is in part because of 99 PI. They did a book club series of podcast episodes where they're doing 100 pages at a time, starting at the beginning of the summer. They've gone through, and it's just been, and they have guests on, and it's great. Really brings. I'm not rereading the book with them. I'm just listening to the podcast episodes.
Yeah, that's what people should do, is listen to the podcast, because isn't that book like insanely long? Yes.
Yeah, it is. It's massive. Yeah. It's not one that you can carry around the paper copy with you. It's not a mobile read. That's for sure.
Yeah, so I'm told that book is, so we've all heard the anecdotes about how, like, they built the bridges too low so the buses couldn't get to the beach. Thanks, Robert Moses. But I've also heard the book is really about government structure, which is it's very on topic for Minneapolis and our new government structure. That book is about government structure and how to work inside of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good fit for you. Give it a listen.
I will listen to the podcast. I will not. I don't know if I have it in me to read.
You'll get the key takeaways from the podcast for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you, Cody Fischer from Footprint Development. It's a very. I hope people enjoyed this conversation. I had a lot of fun.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, John.
I'm your host, John Edwards. This has been the Wedge Live podcast. Thank you for listening.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.